The past few years, we have celebrated Holy Humor on the Sunday after Easter. But really, the tradition, which started in the Middle Ages, had its roots on Easter Sunday, when people told jokes and funny stories in church to get everyone laughing to really celebrate Jesus leaping to new life in the resurrection. This year, my last Sunday falls on what might have been Holy Humor Sunday, which might have been why none of the team suggested that as the theme for next week. But for 30 years before I came to you, I made a fool of myself for Christ on Easter Sunday. I think it started the year after we adopted a baby girl on Easter Sunday. Only the members of ministry and personnel knew about her arrival. The staff found out on the day of her birth, which happened to be Maundy Thursday that year. And that also happened to be the birthday of my colleague in ministry. She never understood how I kept the news secret through her birthday lunch until dessert arrived, but I did want her to have her moment in the sun. The next week, that colleague told an illustrated children's story about a mother who couldn't keep her baby, and a family who lived in, let's say, Oakville, who desperately wanted a baby. And as in Robert Munsch's book, I'll Love You Forever, at each stage of the story, there was a verse sung by the music director, by an angel, first to the mother, then the parents, and finally to the baby. As the song was sung to the baby, I walked out with my older daughter and our new baby girl. The children gathered around, excited, touching her toes, asking her name. Was she really your baby? Is it really true? Meanwhile, the adults were quietly sobbing in the pews. The news spread like wildfire throughout the neighborhood. One of our children wasn't at church because she was at a neighboring friend's birthday party and her parents had stayed home as a result. I don't think they ever missed an Easter after that. The news reached the hosts, even though they weren't members of our church. She immediately left the party and rushed home, bursting in, shouting, "Reverend Morar has a baby!" Needless to say, the next year, as Easter approached, people kept asking me, "Well, what are you doing this Easter?" And that is how the children's time on Easter Sunday turned into a surprise for everyone. And I started thinking about what I could do for the next year, right after the previous Easter, to give the congregation a sense of the surprise of the resurrection and the empty tomb each year. So on this, my 40th Easter Sunday preaching, I'm perhaps rather selfishly looking back to the 30 years in which I made a fool of myself for Christ on Easter Sunday. One year, I brought my tools with me into church, along with a whole lot of chocolate Easter eggs, and drilled, sawed, and hammered my way into the eggs to show the children that they, like the tomb, were empty. Not the children, that is, the eggs. Another year, I was the gardener digging chocolate eggs out of Oreo cookie dirt. One year, I broke an egg on the head of our music director, who was wearing a tux at the time. That was the year that I realized that no one in my church, lay or staff, really trusted that I wouldn't break a full raw egg on him. The gasp was electric when the crack of the egg sounded through my microphone. It did require some faith on my part because I had the children choose the egg from the carton, and not all of the eggs were hollow because I'd run out of breath to blow them all out. And I did start by laying plastic sheeting under the chair that I prepared for Dan, so perhaps I had set them up to be suspicious or to not be trusting that I would protect him. Another year I was a caterpillar who, with the help of 4 6'5" young men, entered a bedsheet cocoon to emerge as a butterfly. Most years, I was inspired by costumes at Malabar's Theatrical Costumers in Toronto, who provide costumes to opera and theatrical groups in the city. I was the donkey one year who carried Mary to Bethlehem and then carried Jesus into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, witnessed the cross, and then went to the tomb. I was the cowardly lion who heard the Easter story and became brave. I even was the Easter bunny, somewhat reluctantly, because I think the Easter bunny can distract us from the Easter story. But I even was the Easter bunny one year, and here's a picture of me making a pastoral call after church. When Martha Stewart got out of prison, I figured I would be Martha Stewart and do a cooking show, making resurrection rolls. Google them. They are a thing. You can do it yourself. When I emailed the trusty salesperson at Malabar's who looked after me each year and asked for a blonde wig, not, I emphasized, a Marilyn Monroe-style wig, saying I was going to be Martha Stewart that year, she emailed back within seconds saying that she was just unpacking Martha Stewart wigs from Martha Stewart herself. She figured, since she'd just gotten out of jail, that she would capitalize on that fact and would be in the news. She's always been quite the business person. I was the Easter chicken who straightened out the Easter story after the Easter bunny tried to hone in on Easter. And one year, thanks to NHL goalie Dave Dryden, who was a member of my church and a faithful friend to my dad, who had been his dad's, Murray Dryden's, last best friend. Dave has hockey equipment that played in some of the great games of his career and prototypes of the goalie masks that he invented. My colleague Andy King and I dressed up in this historic gear and entered the church, crestfallen after our star player was injured and taken out of the playoffs on Good Friday. We disappeared at the front of the church and reappeared instants later as the centurion and the angel in the garden by the empty tomb to tell the rest of the Easter story. And my last year, when Easter was on April Fool's Day, I was Santa, entering to Joy to the World and learning from Andy King that Easter was the reason for Christmas. Looking back, those Easter surprises were the hardest work of my worship year. Coming up with the idea, figuring out the costume, writing the script, ordering the costume, and picking up and delivering it back to Malabar's in Toronto. One year I had someone else pick up the costume. It was the only one year, wrapped up carefully so they wouldn't see what it was. They messaged me that Malabar's hadn't got what I ordered, so had sent me a giraffe instead. It was 5 hours of desperately trying to find an alternative before her husband convinced her that she really should let me know that it was an April Fool's joke. So fortunately, I did not have to come up with a script for a giraffe for Easter Sunday. And memorizing the script was always a challenge with so much else going on in Holy Week. And then the nerves as I dealt with all of the spontaneity that children bring to the enterprise. To surprise everyone, including the staff, meant it was all on me. I had a dresser who helped me to do a costume change in the few seconds I had after doing the opening part of the service at the front, disappearing under the church and reappearing a minute or two later at the back. But no one else knew except for the couple of years that I had other staff actively involved in the script, and particularly Andy King. Why try so hard to surprise people? Because for at least one Sunday a year, I wanted people to leave their rational minds, to set aside their doubts, and to simply experience the surprise and the joy of the empty tomb. The resurrection is where Christians start speaking a different language from everyone else, the language of miracle, the words of faith. accepting, believing, celebrating Jesus' resurrection as the living Christ holds the church together. We doubt the miracle of Easter morning. We diminish the mystery with all our explanations. We come up with the notion that the resurrection was something that happened in the minds of the disciples rather than the body of Jesus. Or with non-Christians, we describe this first century Jesus of Nazareth as a gifted leader, a provocative teacher, a prophet, even a powerful moral figure that the world should emulate. Maybe the guards did fall asleep and some well-meaning disciples came to take the body. Maybe Jesus wasn't really dead, only drugged or in a coma or hypnotized, and he came out of it and escaped the tomb. We expect life and death to follow a certain set of rules and to meet certain rational criteria. But maybe, just maybe, all our doubts are wrong. When we refuse to let the miracle be miraculous, when we try to crimp and cramp it to fit our style, we find ourselves distorting everything that made up Jesus' life and ministry on earth. U2's Bono posits that either Jesus was the Messiah or he was a nutcase. He argues that the idea that the entire course of civilization for over half of the globe could have its fate changed and turned upside down by a nutcase, for me, that's far-fetched. Well, to paraphrase Bono in a song that he wrote, inspired by C.S. Lewis, the universe exploded because of one man's life. The resurrection is our spiritual supernova. Let's experience it as the true miracle it is, without trying to make it fit our expectations and especially our limitations. I hope that perhaps I've made you laugh, surprised you a bit, brought you Easter hope as you have reminisced with me. And I leave you with a clip of the angel and the centurion in the garden outside the empty tomb.
Who are you? I'm a messenger from God, and I've come to bring a great message. This is the best news ever. The tomb is empty. Jesus has risen. He's alive.
No way. It can't be. You're under arrest.
You can't arrest me. Just like you couldn't arrest God, or imprison love, or lock up hope. Silly